Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the sources you share with us, the articles, the research, the critical essays, and distill them into the essential knowledge you need to be well-informed. Today, we are undertaking a journey into the work of a filmmaker who, I think it's fair to say, stands as one of the most uncompromising voices in contemporary global cinema.
Right.
We're talking about Andrey Zvyagintsev.
It's a fascinating body of work, and it's one defined not by, quantity, but by this extraordinary rigor.
Absolutely.
Over 2 decades, Zvyagintsev has released just 5 feature films. That's it. From his explosive debut, The Return in 2003, right up to Loveless in 2017.
Just 5 films.
Just 5. But that limited patient output has garnered, 2 Oscar nominations, major awards at every top festival, Cannes, Venice. He's cemented this profound international impact with a very small, very dense filmography.
And I think that's the crucial context we need to start with. Because in an era of, franchise filmmaking, algorithmic content, this high-volume churn that dominates the cultural landscape.
He's the total opposite.
He's a defiant outlier. This is a director who refuses to compromise, who takes years between projects, and who treats every single film not as entertainment, but as a profound moral and aesthetic inquiry.
Yes, he doesn't just want your attention, he demands your participation. His work requires a different kind of engagement, absolutely.
It really does.
He's established himself as the necessary and often really painful heir to Russia's rich cinematic tradition. He's carrying that torch, but forging a vision that is distinctly, I'd say brutally, his own.
Brutally is a good word for it.
His cinema is slow. It is patient. And the cumulative emotional effect is, it's devastating. It burrows deep into your psyche because it's dealing with the absolute fundamentals: human selfishness, institutional failure, the big stuff.
So our mission today, for you, the learner, is to trace this remarkable, uncompromising trajectory. We're going to deconstruct his style, how he synthesized these monumental influences of classical cinema especially.
Tarkovsky and Bergman.
The 2 giants, right. How he forged that into his own unique cinematic language. We're also going to look into the unique, almost architectural process behind his morally complex screenplays.
And then the films themselves?
Exactly. We'll analyze how his 5 masterworks form this interconnected meditation on familial decay, institutional failure, and what he seems to diagnose as a kind of spiritual bankruptcy in contemporary Russian society.
I think the initial core takeaway for anyone approaching Zvyagintsev is that you have to discard the idea of passive consumption. This is not background noise.
Not at all.
His films, they don't provide simple catharsis. They don't give you easy answers. They ask these fundamental questions about responsibility, and those questions, they absolutely refuse to leave you after the credits roll.
Okay, let's unpack this and start with his foundations. What makes him, perhaps paradoxically, both a late arrival and a fully formed master? He was born in Novosibirsk, Siberia in 1964.
Right.
And he came to feature filmmaking quite late. His celebrated debut, The Return, he was 39. That's not the typical trajectory of a celebrated director, is it?
No, not at all. And I think that delayed arrival was absolutely crucial to the quality of his work. It's a really important detail.
Why so crucial?
Well, unlike many auteurs who start young, propelled by, sheer kinetic energy, Zvyagintsev brought a real maturity and a profound life experience to his very first film. He didn't rush. He trained first as an actor at the Russian Academy of Theater Arts.
Ah, the acting background.
Right. And he spent years working across theater and television. So by the time he stepped behind the camera for a feature, he wasn't just experimenting. He had a fully formed worldview.
You can feel that weight, can't you? It's
Yeah.
not just the energy of a young director showing off their shots.
Yeah.
You feel a weight of a life that's been observed and digested, not just imagined.
Precisely. And that background in acting fundamentally shaped his directorial approach. He understands performance from the inside out.
Which explains the actors. Their performances are always unnervingly real.
They're astonishing. That's how he gets that absolute, almost alarming naturalism from his performers. Even when his films veer toward grand allegory, his characters never, ever strike a false note. They feel profoundly real, breathing with authentic, complicated life.
Which, of course, makes their tragedies all the more immediate and painful for you as the viewer.
Absolutely.
Because you believe them.
So before we get into that distinctive aesthetic, we have to talk about the most famous and maybe the least understood influence, which is the giant shadow of Andrei Tarkovsky.
The unavoidable comparison.
It's always the first thing people mention, and you can see why, given the shared heritage and that formal severity.
It is the first comparison any critic makes. And, Understandably so. They share this vast common ground, a persistent concern with spiritual malaise,
Right.
the use of long takes, that contemplative pacing, the recurring use of water as a visual motif, and of course, a dedication to creating images of just stunning formal beauty. Zvyagintsev is clearly operating within that great, serious tradition of Russian cinema. But, and this is the key, if he were merely an imitator, we wouldn't be dedicating an entire deep dive to him. So here's where it gets really interesting. This is the crucial split, the aha moment that defines Zvyagintsev specific philosophy. What separates his worldview from Tarkovsky's quest for the sublime?
It comes down entirely to the promise of transcendence. That's it. Tarkovsky, even amidst the greatest suffering and degradation, was always reaching for the transcendent, for the mystical.
There was always a window open to something else.
Exactly. His films offered these moments of grace, of spiritual possibility, however fleeting or difficult they were to achieve. You think of the end of Stalker, where, despite all the physical decay, the rain seems almost sacramental.
A cleansing.
A promise of spiritual cleansing or possibility, yes.
Zvyagintsev seems to actively, deliberately shut that window and lock it.
He slams it shut. And that's the brutal modernity of his vision. Zvyagintsev remains relentlessly grounded in the brutal materiality of contemporary existence. His cinema offers no such comfort, no spiritual escape hatch.
It's a godless universe.
It's a universe where institutions have failed, where the spiritual landscape is utterly depleted, and where redemption is just perpetually out of reach.
We can use the very symbol they share, water, to illustrate that difference perfectly, can't we? In Leviathan, the water is certainly not sacramental.
Not at all. It is the crashing, indifferent, absolutely relentless waves of the Barents Sea. It's not a symbol of grace. It symbolizes nature's absolute indifference to human conflict, to our petty legal battles, to our moral suffering.
It's just a force.
A powerful, primal force that simply waits to reclaim all human constructions. Tarkovsky was seeking grace. Zvyagintsev is observing oblivion. And that makes the suffering of his characters feel so much heavier because there is no divine or mystical force to appeal to. It's just you alone with your tragedy.
And that tragedy, that suffering, is often intensely domestic. Which brings us to another equally important, though often less discussed, influence, Ingmar Bergman.
You cannot analyze Zvyagintsev without accounting for Bergman. I think it's just as important as Tarkovsky.
Really?
Absolutely. While Tarkovsky gave him the scale and the spiritual preoccupation, Bergman gave him the psychological precision. Bergman was the undisputed master at dissecting marriage, at portraying the middle class without a shred of sentimentality.
And it's showing how intimacy can curdle.
Exactly. Demonstrating that the deepest intimacy can, over time, curdle into profound, unshakable contempt.
And we see that dynamic, that psychological battlefield, in such stark detail in his later work.
Loveless is the textbook example. The opening scenes, the arguments over the sale of the apartment, the vicious mutual critiques.
It's pure Bergman.
It feels like a story that could exist entirely in that pressurized domestic universe of Bergman. It's a microscopic, devastating portrait of a divorcing couple whose complete, self-absorbed inability to look beyond their own hatred catalyzes a catastrophe for their son.
And like Bergman, he understands that the stage for these dramas isn't some grand arena.
No, it's the kitchen table, the bedroom, the family dacha. Like Bergman, Zvyagintsev recognizes that the most profound moral dramas play out in these intimate, pressurized domestic spheres. These spaces become the stages for moral judgment.
So the resulting synthesis is incredibly rigorous. You have Tarkovsky's visual grammar and spiritual concern, but it's tempered by Bergman's psychological sharpness. And you also noted the influence of Michelangelo Antonioni and Kim Ki-duk. How do they fit into this unique blend?
Well, Antonioni is evident in Zvyagintsev framing, what we might call the architectural framing of alienation.
What do you mean by that?
Antonioni loved to place his characters as these small figures against vast, often modern and sterile architectural backdrops. It was a way of emphasizing their insignificance and their fundamental emotional disconnection from their environment and from each other.
And Zvyagintsev does this constantly.
Constantly, especially in Moscow, using glass, concrete, and long corridors to trap and isolate his characters.
That immediately calls to mind the apartments in Elena and Loveless. They're beautiful, but completely cold.
Yeah.
Emotionally uninhabitable.
Exactly. They're prisons. And Kim Ki-duk, the South Korean director, brings in that element of brutal minimalism. Zvyagintsev's aesthetic is never flashy, it's spare, it's focused, and it's occasionally capable of sudden, shocking violence or emotional extremity, but delivered with this almost minimalist restraint.
So it's this unique blend. He draws from the greats, but is beholden to none of them.
That's it. The result is a cinematic language that is unmistakably his own.
It's clear that the foundation of his aesthetic is deep, but the foundation of his narratives is equally profound. So let's transition now into section 2 and focus on the architecture of the script, because Zvyagintsev is a director known for his images, and yet the bedrock is the writing.
The bedrock is absolutely the writing, and we have to credit his essential collaboration with the screenwriter Oleg Negin.
Right.
Negin has co-written every Zvyagintsev film since Elena in 2011, and this partnership is the engine room that delivers the moral complexity we've been talking about.
So what does that collaboration look like? Because we know they take years between films. That must imply an incredible dedication to the script's development.
It's a painstaking, lengthy gestation period. I mean, they spend months, sometimes years, developing these screenplays, researching locations, meticulously refining character motivations. They are not writing quickly to meet a deadline. They are building a structure.
And that patience results in what you call architectural precision. What does that mean in terms of the narrative structure?
It means nothing is extraneous. The script operates like a finely tuned machine where every small detail introduced in Act 1, maybe a seemingly innocuous statement or an overlooked object like Elena's phone, resonates with devastating force by Act 3.
So everything pays off.
Everything pays off. Their scripts have this inexorable logic where the ending is always a direct and necessary consequence of the moral compromises made at the beginning.
This precision is applied directly to character, and this is where the ethical complexity truly emerges. They deliberately shun the traditional hero narrative.
Entirely. You don't get protagonists in the conventional Hollywood sense, people you are simply meant to root for. We are presented with deeply flawed, often compromised individuals navigating systems that are themselves either corrupt or entirely broken.
Which leads to one of the greatest insights into Zvyagintsev's genius, what you called empathy without approval. How do they achieve that balance without the films just becoming purely judgmental?
This is the ethical razor's edge they walk. It's so difficult to do. The genius is in providing the context and the detail necessary to create genuine empathy for these compromised characters.
Like Elena.
Elena is the perfect example. We understand why she makes her final, horrifying choice. We see the desperate fear that her impoverished grandchildren will fall into this cycle of poverty and violence. We feel the pressure of her class anxiety. But understanding her desperate motivation doesn't mean we endorse her actions.
So you're saying they force the viewer to engage morally. You can't just consume the narrative as good versus evil. It's a challenge to your own moral certainty.
Absolutely. They refuse to provide easy approval or simple villains. Look at Kolya in Leviathan. He's not some flawless martyr.
No, he's a difficult man.
He's stubborn, he's proud, he drinks too much, and his pride absolutely contributes to his downfall. Yet he is fighting a monstrous, corrupt system. By presenting us with a flawed protagonist fighting a morally indefensible adversary, Zvyagintsev forces us to hold those two conflicting ideas simultaneously, which enriches the moral weight of the tragedy.
And speaking of restraint, the scripts are also famous for their sparse, almost minimalist dialogue. It's remarkable how little his characters actually say compared to how much they convey.
Oh, the dialogue restraint is profound. The characters communicate largely through silence, through these loaded glances, through subtle shifts in body language, and through their physical isolation within the frame.
And when they do talk,
when dialogue does occur, it is often devastatingly naturalistic. It's people talking past each other. Their conversations are failure points, fundamentally failing to connect or resolve conflict.
So that lack of communication then reinforces the core theme of isolation. The words themselves are often inadequate to bridge the vast distances between people.
Exactly. And this sophistication leads directly into the idea of the inexorable logic of fate. But as we discussed, this isn't a supernatural fate. It's highly conditional.
The narrative unfolds with a kind of devastating inevitability, where the fate is the consequence created entirely by human actions, specifically human selfishness, cowardice, or moral blindness. You see the chain reaction unfold with cold, hard logic, which is far more terrifying than any external mysterious force.
And we see that structural sophistication perfectly realized in Leviathan. It's a massive film that never feels unwieldy because the script is so tightly organized.
The script manages to weave together so many disparate elements, It simultaneously functions as a contemporary tragedy, Kolya's personal battle over his land,
Then there's the political allegory about the total failure of state institutions.
and a biblical parable, drawing directly from the Book of Job.
It's a structural masterclass. It integrates these three scales, the personal, the political, and the spiritual, into a cohesive whole. The personal suffering becomes a mirror for the institutional suffering, which in turn is framed against the vast, indifferent questions of existence posed by the Book of Job. That level of narrative integration is incredibly rare.
That structural rigor sets the stage for a filmography that, while chronologically separated by years, feels like one single, massive, devastating argument about the condition of the modern soul. Let's move now to Section 3, the filmography. 5 studies in failure. And we have to start with the astonishing debut that immediately announced a major talent, The Return.
The Return from 2003. It's an astonishing first film. It won the Golden Lion at Venice, which is
Almost unheard of for a debut.
right. It has the confidence and the formal mastery of a director working 20 years into their career, not just beginning.
And the premise, as we noted, is mythic and simple. 2 adolescent brothers, Andrey and Ivan, live with their mother until their father, who's been absent for 12 years, suddenly returns. He takes them on a mysterious, tense, tragic journey to a remote island.
The film operates on 2 profound layers simultaneously. On one level, it's this tense, taut psychological drama about how the boys respond to the sudden imposition of patriarchal authority.
The 2 different responses.
Exactly. Andre, the older one, seeks approval. He's desperate for the connection he never had. Ivan, the younger boy, is aggressive, he's resistant, he challenges the stranger's identity and authority at every single turn.
But allegorically, it's much deeper than that, isn't it? It feels like a meditation on Russia's relationship with its authoritarian, often absent past, and the profound damage wrought by a missing or abusive patriarch, this powerful archetypal force that disappears and reappears without explanation.
Visually, it was fully formed right out of the gate. Working with cinematographer Mikhail Krichman, who would become his constant collaborator, they established a visual aesthetic that was immediately recognizable. The widescreen compositions, using dramatic chiaroscuro lighting, it evokes classical painting.
Let's ground that technical term for the listener. When we talk about chiaroscuro, what are we talking about?
We're referring to the intense contrast between light and dark, using light to highlight certain figures and allowing deep, enveloping darkness to dominate the rest of the frame.
A very painterly technique.
Precisely. It's a technique borrowed directly from painters like Rembrandt, where the contrast isn't just aesthetic, it's thematic. It makes the modern, often mundane locations like the cabin or the boat feel as grand and tragic as a Renaissance portrait. And the color palette, all grays, deep blues, muted earth tones, establishes that pervasive, deep melancholy right from the start.
And the performances are essential to making that mythic framework feel immediate, particularly those young actors, Ivan Dobronravov and Vladimir Garin.
They are perfect. Ivan's fierce, almost feral rejection of the father versus Andrei's solemn, passive obedience. They embody the conflicting responses to authority we see throughout society.
And the ending, of course, is signature Zvyagintsev. It's ambiguous, devastating, and open.
Completely. The father dies, and the photograph that might prove his identity is lost forever in the water. We are left grappling with the mystery of his identity and the purpose of the journey, refusing any kind of easy moral or narrative closure.
The film's global impact was instantaneous, winning the Golden Lion at Venice. But that success was immediately shadowed by a profound, eerie tragedy.
Yes, the immense sadness surrounding this film is impossible to ignore. Vladimir Garin, who played Andrei, the older brother, he drowned just months after filming was completed.
Horrifying.
It adds this chilling, profoundly eerie layer of sorrow to a film that is already obsessed with water, with absence, and with the sudden, irreversible nature of loss. It's a fact that lends a real-world weight to the film's fictional themes of finality.
4 years later, Zvyagintsev released his next feature, The Banishment, in 2007. This is the one that often seems to divide critics and audiences and feels like his most overt wrestling match with the Tarkovsky legacy.
It is the divisive bridge film, absolutely. It's loosely based on a 1953 William Saroyan novel, The Laughing Matter. The plot involves a family retreat to the husband's childhood home in the remote countryside. The wife reveals she is pregnant by another man.
And it sets off this horrific tragedy.
Yes, a tragedy fueled by misunderstanding and the husband's overwhelming, toxic masculine pride.
It's highly symbolic, heavily contemplative, and deliberately slow. Some critics at the time felt it prioritized style over narrative substance. Why is that slow, patient pace necessary for this particular story?
I think the film is primarily concerned with emotional claustrophobia and the erosion of trust, and the pace serves that purpose. By using these long contemplative sequences and minimal action, Zvyagintsev forces us to sit within the decaying relationships, to feel the distance between the characters. It is an internal film.
So it's not about plot, it's about a state of being.
Exactly. It explores the breakdown of communication between spouses, the violence lurking beneath domestic surfaces, and the inability of love to overcome fundamental human weakness and pride. It's less explicitly political than what followed, focusing instead on these universal, timeless questions of trust and betrayal within the most intimate unit.
Krichman's cinematography is still stunning, though. The use of that golden light, the careful composition of bodies within austere architectural spaces.
It's aesthetically beautiful, capturing what you might call a morphal distance that we often see in his framing. In retrospect, even if it frustrated some at the time, the banishment was a necessary step. It was Zvyagintsev wrestling most directly with the visual and thematic influence of Tarkovsky before emerging with the sharper, uniquely contemporary social voice that began with Elena.
And that unique voice spoke loudly and directly in 2011 with Elena. This marks the decisive shift toward explicitly political cinema.
Yes, but the politics here are internal to the system. It's focused specifically on class and economics. Elena is a direct, chilling critique of contemporary Russian society, centered on the vast, corrosive gulf between the obscenely rich and the struggling poor. It's all about the moral compromises people make when confronted with that gulf.
The protagonist's dilemma is masterful in its complexity. Elena, a former nurse from a lower-class background, is married to the wealthy businessman Vladimir. She has an impoverished son and grandchildren who are desperate for her help.
While Vladimir's daughter from a previous marriage is affluent and completely aimless.
Right. And when Vladimir suffers a heart attack and decides his money will go to his daughter, leaving Elena and her side of the family vulnerable, she faces this existential choice.
And this is truly where the Zvyagintsev collaboration achieves that high-wire act of moral ambiguity. We are never allowed to simplify Elena's character. We see her desperation, the fear that her family will be consumed by the violence and poverty she so desperately tries to escape. But we also see her calculating self-interest and her class resentment. The tension just builds and builds to that final, irrevocable act.
And when she makes her final choice, you, as the viewer, are horrified by the action, yet you can't completely condemn her because you've been made to understand the pressures that drove her to it.
Exactly. It's compelling moral cinema because it refuses to let you off the hook. She's forced to navigate a moral landscape where the institutions, medicine, family, law offer her no comfort or justice. She has to decide which family she will serve and which life she will save, and she does so within this mechanical, cruel, capitalist system.
The film also features one of the most masterful uses of music I can recall in modern cinema, underscoring the mechanical cruelty of that system.
The driving, repetitive score of Philip Glass's Symphony No. 3. It's used brilliantly as a rhythmic counterpoint to Elena's movements.
How so?
It underscores her physical journey through Moscow's deeply polarized neighborhoods, from the sterile, quiet affluence of her apartment to her son's chaotic, working-class district. The music is almost mechanical, highlighting the inevitable quality of a society organized entirely around the cold, hard logic of money and survival.
Elena won the Special Jury Prize at Cannes, solidifying Zvyagintsev as a serious social and political filmmaker. But it sparked controversy domestically, viewed by some critics as overly critical. And that controversy was merely the opening act for his next film.
Leviathan, in 2014, his epic of institutional failure, and it became an immediate international sensation and a domestic lightning rod.
The inspiration is fascinating, combining the biblical book of Job, the story of man whose faith is tested by divine trials, with a real-life, eminent domain story from Colorado, of all places, and transplanting it all to a decaying coastal town on the Barents Sea.
The result is this profound, devastating tragedy about the corrosive nature of power, human pride, and the sheer impossibility of achieving justice when the system is arrayed against you. Kolya, an ordinary man, battles a corrupt mayor who is determined to seize his land and home for a development project.
And the film makes it blisteringly clear that Kolya is not just fighting the mayor. He's fighting the entire machinery of the state.
The critique is explicitly devastating. It diagnoses the full pathology of contemporary Russian power. The mayor is the petty tyrant capturing state power for personal enrichment. The police are simply enforcers of the powerful's will. And crucially, the church is shown as thoroughly complicit,
Yes, that was shocking.
providing spiritual cover and blessing the system of theft and corruption. There is a particularly chilling scene where a priest lectures Kolya using biblical justification immediately after having participated in a toast with the corrupt officials.
So even the Moscow lawyer who comes to defend Kolya is ultimately powerless.
He is. His knowledge of the law and his professional acumen mean absolutely nothing against the raw, brute force of institutional power. It's an argument that the system is not merely flawed, it is perfectly designed to protect the connected and crush the individual.
The location and Krichman's cinematography are essential, using the harsh, indifferent beauty of the Barents Sea and the decaying infrastructure.
And the symbolism is profound, particularly that recurring image of the beached whale skeleton, the Leviathan. It serves as both a memento mori, a reminder of death, and a symbol of biblical forces and nature's absolute indifference. It reminds us that Kolya's struggles, while devastating to him, are tiny specks against the scale of cosmic or natural history.
Leviathan was a global success. It won Best Screenplay at Cannes and became the first Russian film in decades nominated for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. But domestically, it provoked fury.
The backlash was massive. It prompted attacks directly from high-level officials, including the Minister of Culture and nationalist critics who universally deemed it anti-Russian propaganda. What's so profoundly ironic is that the state's hostile reaction proved the film's core argument, that Russian society, or at least its power structure, had become fundamentally intolerant of self-criticism.
And finally, we arrive at Loveless in 2017. A film that feels both hyper-specific to the modern world and universally resonant in its depiction of disconnection.
Loveless is, for many, his most formally perfect and emotionally devastating work. It is the definitive portrait of the spiritual void in the modern middle-class existence.
The plot is simple, yet horrifying. Xenia and Boris, a divorcing couple, despise each other with this intense mutual hatred. Their 12-year-old son, Alyosha, overhears his mother stating she never wanted him, and then he disappears.
The structural genius is in how the first act establishes the parents' overwhelming narcissism before the core event even happens. They are entirely self-absorbed, preoccupied with their new partners and their own hatred.
They're just living past each other.
Completely. Their self-absorption and mutual contempt are so complete that when the child vanishes, the film instantly transforms. It becomes this profound meditation on how emotional absence enables actual physical absence.
He was already invisible to them.
Alyosha disappears, but he had already been rendered invisible by his parents' self-absorption and lack of genuine care. The bold choice is that we know almost nothing about him, which forces us to experience his disappearance directly as a void.
But I want to talk about the crucial counterpoint in the darkness. The civilian volunteers who organized the search?
Yes, they are the film's only point of light, fragile as it is. The state apparatus, the police, is incompetent and indifferent. They take mandatory reports and do little real work.
It's all just procedure.
Right. It is the organized network of civilian volunteers, acting purely from genuine altruistic care, that steps in. They represent the possibility that while institutions fail and families dissolve, individual human connection and empathy are still possible, though profoundly rare.
Visually, Krichman captures Moscow in winter as a place of harsh beauty and profound spiritual emptiness. All glass, snow, and gray concrete.
The isolation is reinforced by visual motifs. The persistent use of reflections in glass and mirrors, characters framed in isolation within the vast, cold apartments. The camera observes them, but they never truly see each other.
And the score here is essential in building the tension. We often focus on Philip Glass, but the score for Loveless was by Evgeny and Sasha Galperin. How does their work create that relentless sense of dread?
The Galperin score is masterfully subtle. Unlike Glass's rhythmic repetitions, this score is characterized by these sustained, low-frequency tones and metallic, almost electronic textures. It creates a sense of slow, inescapable dread rather than rhythmic anxiety. It operates beneath the surface, constantly reminding you that something is fundamentally wrong, not just in this family, but in the entire emotional landscape.
And that ending is iconic.
The final image of Xenia on a treadmill, running and running but going absolutely nowhere, wearing a tracksuit emblazoned with the word Russia. It is the perfect visual metaphor for the emptiness at the heart of modern, consumerist, atomized existence, busyness without purpose, effort without movement, survival without meaning.
Loveless resonated globally as a definitive portrait of contemporary disconnection, winning the jury prize at Cannes and another Academy Award nomination.
Across these 5 films, you see this thematic consistency and an artistic evolution. It moves from the mythic allegory of The Return into the stark social and political realism of Leviathan and Loveless, but always retaining that intense formal rigor.
Which brings us to Section 4, the unmistakable cinematic language and recurring themes. Let's dissect that unique visual style, the formality combined with the unsettling realism.
What's fascinating is his deliberate avoidance of conventional visual manipulation. He consistently favors wide shots over close-ups, often placing characters as small, often insignificant figures against vast architectural or natural spaces.
Which serves to emphasize their isolation.
Exactly. It reminds us that individual human drama plays out against these indifferent or overpowering environments.
But when he does use a close-up, it hits with extraordinary force.
Because they are so sustained, they force us into an uncomfortable, prolonged intimacy. They demand that we truly confront the raw vulnerability, the cruelty, or the inner turmoil of the person on screen. They are not quick cuts for emotional punctuation. They are observations of the soul under pressure.
And we noted the controlled color palette.
It's consistently cool and cold, heavy on blues and grays, especially in the winter landscapes of Loveless and the bleak seascapes of Leviathan. Warm tones are used sparingly, often in an almost elegiac way, reserved perhaps for fleeting moments of memory or lost warmth. And circling back to that classical influence, the expressive use of artificial light, those sustained chiaroscuro effects, ground the contemporary settings in a sense of historical artistry and deep tragedy.
That focus on sustained observation also applies directly to his use of long takes, which are foundational to his method.
Absolutely. He trusts the audience. He allows scenes to breathe and develop without the hyper-edited rhythms of conventional filmmaking. This approach creates a powerful sense of lived experience. It demands that your attention is sustained long enough to notice the nuanced details within the frame, to feel the temporal reality of the events unfolding. It's an anti-distraction technique.
Beyond the visual, the sound design is incredibly important to creating that sense of reality.
The soundscapes are rich with environmental detail, what we call diegetic sound, meaning the sound that originates naturally within the world of the film. We hear the wind, the water, distant machinery, footsteps echoing in cold hallways. These elements anchor the films in a palpable, physical reality, which contrasts so starkly with the character's emotional isolation.
And the use of music is highly restrained, making those rare appearances intensely powerful, almost like a commentary track.
Exactly. Philip Glass is used as an ironic counterpoint in Elena, where the high culture score overlays a story of cold-blooded murder and class desperation. In Leviathan, the score integrates passages from Glass's opera Akhenaten, lending a sense of biblical tragedy and grandeur to this small provincial battle over a plot of land. It elevates the conflict from local drama to universal struggle.
But ultimately, the most effective sound tool is often the absence of sound. Silence.
Oh, yes. When scenes play out with only diegetic sound or even total silence, the emotional weight falls entirely on the actors in the situation. This restraint makes the eventual return of music or a sharp shift in the soundscape all the more impactful and shocking. It forces us to confront the quiet desperation of their lives.
Let's discuss architecture and space, because Zvyagintsev is masterful at showing how physical spaces, houses, apartments, landscapes actively trap or reflect his characters' emotional states.
He shows a sophisticated understanding of how architecture shapes and reflects human experience. His characters are constantly trapped, literally or metaphorically. Their apartments feel cramped and oppressive, even the luxurious ones. The large house in Elena feels more like a sterile, cold prison, an emotional quarantine zone, than a home. The wealth provides status, but no genuine comfort or warmth.
And it's only in natural, vast, liminal spaces, the beaches, the forests, the coast, where characters seem to find temporary, albeit brutal, freedom or moments of confrontation.
Those spaces are crucial. And the frequent visual motifs of windows and thresholds, the boundaries between the inside and the outside, the private and the public, they underscore the pervasive theme of isolation. Characters constantly stare out at worlds they cannot enter or observe each other through glass barriers, reinforcing that fundamental disconnection.
So now we get to the core thematic argument that connects all 5 films: familial dissolution as societal microcosm.
This is the unifying theory of Zvyagintsev's work. Every single film features a family in crisis or outright dissolution. Fathers are abusive or absent, like in The Return. Mothers are neglectful or trapped, as in Elena and Loveless. And the children are inevitably damaged or disappear entirely. Marriage is not a union. It is a battleground where intimacy has curdled into active contempt.
And the crucial point is that this breakdown is never just personal melodrama.
No, the family unit is always a microcosm of a larger social failure. When the basic unit of society fails, due to economic pressures, spiritual emptiness, or overwhelming individual selfishness, the entire social fabric tears. He uses the failure of the intimate sphere to diagnose the failure of the larger system. He refuses to sentimentalize the institution of the family. He shows it for what it becomes when moral integrity fails.
Next, the theme that becomes explicitly direct with Elena and Leviathan, the corruption of institutions.
If we connect this to the bitter picture, Zvyagintsev critique is precise and unrelenting. He addresses the endemic dysfunction of Russian institutions, the state bureaucracy, the church, the police, the courts. The overwhelming conclusion he draws is that justice is fundamentally impossible because the law protects only the connected and the powerful.
But let's pause on the universal relevance here. If you haven't seen the films, you might think this is solely a critique of post-Soviet Russia.
And while the specific details are certainly Russian, the corrupt mayors, the specific architecture, the mechanisms of corruption are universal, he is diagnosing how power operates in any system, how institutions reproduce privilege, how the powerful are shielded from consequence, and how even the spiritual sphere can be co-opted to provide cover for material greed. He's diagnosing a global pathology through a specific national lens.
The final overarching theme that pulls all of this together is spiritual emptiness and absence, the godless universe.
This is more profound than just simple non-belief. It's an active, suffocating absence of meaning, of connection, of any transcendent force that might intervene or offer comfort. Prayer goes unanswered. The churches are often portrayed as corrupt or merely serving political power rather than spiritual guidance.
And Loveless embodies this void perfectly, right down to its title.
The characters in Loveless are hollowed out. They are trapped by a modern, consumerist existence that provides them with status. The expensive apartments, the nice clothes, the affairs, but absolutely no genuine satisfaction or love. They buy things, they seek easy escape, they pursue status, but nothing, absolutely nothing, fills the resulting emptiness. The void is internal, not external.
But despite this starkness, you argue that his work is not nihilistic.
I don't believe it is. The very act of documenting this loss, this spiritual poverty, with such rigorous aesthetic care and such unrelenting honesty, is itself an assertion of meaning. He doesn't look away from the darkness, he forces us to look with him. The beauty of his images suggests that the recognition of darkness, the honest, clear-eyed mourning of what has been lost, is the necessary first step toward addressing it. He provides diagnosis, not necessarily a cure, but diagnosis is the moral act.
Let's move to Section 5, Legacy, Impact, and the Challenge Ahead. Internationally, Zvyagintsev is clearly a giant.
He is a singular figure among contemporary Russian filmmakers. 2 Oscar nominations, major awards at every top festival. His work provides international audiences with a fiercely intelligent, uncompromising vision of contemporary Russia that directly counters official state narratives. He proves that you can combine rigorous artistry with deeply critical social engagement.
And his influence extends far beyond Russia, informing what we often call slow cinema.
Absolutely. His synthesis of formal rigor and political engagement has inspired filmmakers globally who seek to make meaningful cinema that challenges conventional pacing. His success proves that patient filmmaking, which trusts the audience to engage with difficult, sustained material, can achieve both profound beauty and necessary political meaning. It proves that serious, uncompromising cinema can still find a global audience in the age of distraction.
His position in Russia, however, remains immensely complicated.
He is simultaneously celebrated by the international art world and by serious Russian critics as one of Russia's greatest living directors, and yet he is attacked by nationalists and officials as unpatriotic or anti-Russian. The irony, as we discussed with Leviathan, is profound. The state's hostile reaction to his films, including attacks and the withholding of funding, validates his film's core critique of a society intolerant of critical self-reflection. It demonstrates the very mechanisms of control he depicts.
Despite that hostility, his success confirms the power of artistic seriousness.
And this raises the important question of responsibility. What ultimately distinguishes him is his gravity toward human behavior. His films insist that our individual choices matter and that they reverberate through the system. We are responsible for the systems we create through our actions, and perhaps even more importantly, through our inactions. He creates morally complex situations where easy judgment is impossible, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable realities of human nature.
So these films aren't just political period pieces then. They are
Wow.
concerned with something far more fundamental.
They are timeless. They address fundamental, timeless questions about human nature, coexistence, and responsibility that will not age. The questions they pose about love, power, faith, and the price of self-absorption are permanent human dilemmas.
Now, the final burning question for anyone who loves his work. It has been 7 years since Loveless. Why the silence?
Zvyagintsev is known for taking his time. 4 to 5 years between films is his norm. But the current political climate in Russia has become significantly more restrictive since 2017, and the kind of international co-production funding that financed his later critical works is certainly more difficult to secure now due to geopolitical tensions.
But the certainty remains that he works entirely on his own terms.
His entire career teaches us exactly that. He waits for the right story and the right structure, regardless of external pressure or time constraints. His next film, whenever it arrives, will undoubtedly be a work of uncompromising moral courage. And given the state of the world since his last feature, it will be worth every single day of the wait.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's summarize the monumental achievement of Andrey Zvyagintsev.
His 5 masterworks stand as one of the most uncompromising examinations of contemporary existence in any art form. They bear witness to our time with stark honesty and staggering beauty, forcing us to look not just at Russian society, but at the universal failures of our modern soul.
They offer no comfort, no easy answers, and no simple catharsis. But that lack of comfort is the reward of attention he offers. An expansion of your understanding and a serious, sustained challenge to your perceptions of morality and meaning.
And if you're ready to start this demanding journey, we have some guidance. I'd say start with The Return for a complete mythic vision in a debut. If you want to engage with his political dimension, go straight to Leviathan.
And Loveless.
And if you want his most formally perfect and emotionally devastating experience, detailing the human cost of spiritual vacancy, watch Loveless.
Zvyagintsev work reminds us that art matters, and that refusing to look away from darkness, the failures of our institutions, the decay in our families, the emptiness in our souls, is the necessary first step toward finding light. The ultimate provocative thought here is that his cinema is designed not just to be seen, but to haunt you, to return to you unexpectedly in the quiet moments, and ultimately to change how you see the world around you. Not through what it shows, but through what it insists you acknowledge within yourself.